Hey, welcome. Happy Friday. I am Brian Green. You are in the Formation Forum. Thank you so much for joining us again this wonderful day that the Lord has made. It is Friday the 13th. Prayerfully, you are not a superstitious person, but if you are, we'll pray for you, right? Here in the Formation Forum, we take principles of leadership and personal development and marry them to the many aspects of everyday life through a lens of truth so that we can foster a biblical worldview. You're with me. You're with us right here for the next 3,600 ticks. That's 1 hour. And we're delighted to have you join us. Since you are watching us on Facebook Live, I'm just going to ask, and I will ask often, please go ahead and like our page, like this page right now. As well, could you go ahead and share it? Sharing it, we always want to know where you are. That allows us to know where you are. Or when you share, when you click that share button. We'd like to see, of course, where God is connecting us. Not just who, but also where God is connecting us to. Again, delighted to have you with me. Very excited about today's show. Last week, if you joined us live or were able to view the recorded show on the WBGR network or at thechristnation.com, you will recall that we talked about narratives. We talked about our narratives, right? We asked the question, who is writing your narrative? We hope you had a good time with that. Hopefully this past week you've been thinking about it. You took it home with you, took it to work with you. You asked other people, who's writing your narrative? We do pray that all of the contents that we're producing, that we're talking through, that it's going to be beneficial, that it's challenging to you, that it's causing you to question things, but also drawing you closer to a greater relationship with the Lord. So this week we want to start off with another question. So we're going to start off with another question. The question that will revolve around our content will revolve around this week is going to be, who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? Now, I'm just going to say right off the bat, right in the beginning, we're only here for an hour, so there's absolutely no way that we're going to be able to get through all the peaks and valleys, the twists and turns, the differences and logical constructs and theological perspectives or positions that a question like this can poke at. There's just no way we're going to be able to address all of that in the time that we have. We are merely asking the question and providing some general beginnings that will further our thought, if you will. So with that in mind, let's do what we do. Right? Let's do what we do. Let's shut the door to the forum and get it in. Let's sit at the table together and break bread, if you will. So the question today, who are you becoming? Have you ever asked yourself? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Have you ever considered that type of question? Who are you becoming? Many people may ask the question, what am I becoming? And consider that from a standpoint of what I'm becoming, but I don't know if anybody or many people ask, who am I becoming? The question, what are you becoming, can focus or have a focus that revolves around what we would consider a teleological center. That's a $5,000 word. Don't worry about it. I paid for it. I'm going to give it to you for free. It's a teleological word, right? So, or teleological center. That is to say that what we become may be focused on the actions we take or an end that we're trying to see happen. Teleology theologically deals with design and purpose, and really specifically within a material world. It is by some means a utilitarian appraisal of yourself. That is not to suggest, again, that the question is not good. I'm not saying that what are you becoming isn't a good question. I think it's good. In the church, we often want to assess our areas of gifting, right? So that we can make a a better decision on where or discern where God is placing us. In other words, we want to be better utilized based on our gifting, what we are able to do. As we communicated, we want to be used of God in the areas which He uniquely designed us for. In business, we do the same thing. In business, we want to assess our areas of competency, right? So that we can better utilize human resources. We do this so that we can better position people so that people will experience successful outcomes as well as the business experiences successful outcomes. It provides really, when you do that, for a healthy business culture, healthy business atmosphere. But what am I becoming is a great question. It allows us again to think about our design. It allows us to think about our purpose. But we're not asking the question, what am I becoming? We are asking who. Who are you becoming? Who am I becoming is meant to primarily be an ontological question. Now, that word is a $7,500 word. I paid for it, but I'm giving it away for free, right? We say primarily, not solely ontological, with the intention of leaving space for other critical logic. But ontological simply means, or has in its sphere, the idea of being. So it's not about a utilitarian. It's not about what you are doing to become something, an end goal of becoming something. It's about who are you becoming, dealing with your being, the person that we are becoming. Again, I'm not asking about your value to a task or your value to a group. I am, at least partially, dealing with your unique worth because of who you are. An ontological question we're dealing with when we're asking who are you becoming, we're talking about your unique worth because of who you are. The question, who are you becoming, is personally evaluative. However, it also has in scope an end reality or position. An end reality, not an end goal, and we'll deal with that a little later. Not in the sense of utility, but rather in the sense of an internal generative process that creates an external connectedness. I could actually say that this way. It is a question of soul formation that creates a heart for the common good. It's caring for your soul with a mind for the culture, for people, for others. In his book, what is it called? Culture Care. Author's name is Makoto Fujimura. In his book, he writes this. He says, generative thinking is fueled by generosity because it so often must work against a mindset that has survival and utility in the foreground. And so who are you becoming, in a sense, is an internal generative process. And so when you begin to think of generative, you're understanding that we're talking about what we are producing on the inside of us, things that are causing production. Who are you becoming? Since we've talked a little bit about the overall question, let's talk about grammatically really what we're saying, what the question is asking. Let's deal with the word becoming. So grammatically in our question, becoming denotes a continuous nature of action. A continuous nature of action. Our question could be said to be addressing the reality of our continuous stage of change. We know that the only thing that is constant in our lives is change. Who are you becoming? Will at some point require further investigation, though, that brings a search into the how we are becoming who we are becoming, right? Becoming tells us that we are not already there. So when we say we are becoming a particular thing, we have a particular end in mind. We're becoming means that we're not already there. Becoming suggests that formation, your change, your formation, your forming is always present, is always present. Becoming can be intentional. It can also be unintentional. So we want to obviously move to the place of intentionality, but sometimes our becoming is interrupted. I would say even unraveled or moved by things unintentionally, things that we didn't intend to shape us, things that we didn't intend to go through. Becoming has in it these and many other elements. So when we say or use the term becoming, we must acknowledge that the general action of becoming, that it is not unique to any person. Becoming is not unique in itself, in its general sense, not unique to any person. We collectively experience a becoming, and we individually are experiencing becoming. Obviously, our discussion today is central to the individual experience, but we still ultimately conclude that since everyone is in this experiential progression, right? Since everyone's in this progression, the collective, all of society, all of the household, all of the workplace is always affected by your individual in your uniqueness, but not unique in becoming as a general sense. Everyone's affected by who you are becoming. In other words, who you are becoming affects the becoming of culture and society. The question also is connecting us back to our narrative. If we are writing our narrative within the narrative of God, as we stated, and I will include those whose faith rests in God as an abstract, or even those who have the absence of God, depending on your theological positioning, who we are becoming is not independent of our theological views, or theistic or non-theistic views. Everything is theological. Everything is theological. Whether you believe in God or not, that's a theological position. Who you are becoming then is a question whose spokes, if you will, touch our moral compass. It's not simply being shaped morally. The spokes touches the question by this question: whose moral code are we being shaped by? Our process of becoming is either objectively directed, or it is subjectively directed. Objectively, something that is external, affecting our internal processes, or subjectively, our internal process is directed by how we effectually digest things externally observed. That's a mouthful, right? Depends on how we intake and digest things from the outside of us, having no objective code, if you will. We'll come back to this in a little bit. So, who we are becoming authorizes how we pen, or the way we are penning our narrative. Who we are becoming is an important aspect or provisioning of the outlining of our own narrative, right? Just like when we talk about the elements of narrative, and we talked about how things were able to shift, or narrative shifts, in the same way, our becoming is not a set path. It can also shift. Becoming is the process of formation. The process of becoming carries in it the tension being informed, inwardly formed, and conformed, externally formed, with an ultimate narrative of being transformed. That is, being someone, not something, being someone other than who we are. Remember the question: who we are becoming. Who we are becoming. So, it's a good question. It's a great question. We are coming to the end of this segment. It's a great question, though, to start off the weekend, right? It's Friday the 13th. I'm messing with your brain. I'm messing with your mind. It's all good. So look, when we return, we will continue to expand our discussion. We'll talk about what shapes our becoming. We'll also talk about things that shape us in our process of becoming. So when we return, we'll talk about what shapes our becoming and things that do indeed shape us. We'll look for you on the other side of this break. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Welcome back. You are in the Formation Forum, where we take principles of leadership and personal development and marry them to the many aspects of our everyday life through a lens of truth so that we can foster a biblical world view. We have been talking today and are talking today about becoming. Today we are considering the question, who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? If you are just joining us, welcome to the forum. We did close the door, but we opened it back up just for you, right? So we're so glad that you're here with us. Let me take a moment to catch you up on our discussion. It's going to take about 10 seconds for that so that we can make sure we're pressing forward. We only have a few minutes. We provided just a quick introduction to our discussion. We talked about what is meant by the word becoming, and we took a few minutes to connect becoming to our narrative, So if you were with us last week, you heard about the question, who is writing your narrative. Today, we're talking about who are you becoming? Listen, since you're with me, since you're on Facebook Live, since you're joining us and we're connected, do me a favor and go ahead and click the like button. My lips not working with me. Click the like button. And also, if you would, click that share button. Very important to us that we see who we are connecting to, but also where we are connecting to. We believe that just speaks to what God is doing through this ministry with the WBGR Network and Christ Nation. So let's go ahead and begin talking about what shapes our becoming. What shapes our becoming? Since becoming is a formation process, we should take a few minutes just to look at some of the things that shape who we are becoming. Consider for a moment Abram. In your Bibles, consider for a moment Abram. Most of us immediately refer to him as Abraham. We think of the Abrahamic covenant, for instance. If you are familiar with the biblical narrative of Abraham, then you will remember, right, that he did not start out being Abraham. In other words, Abram went through a generative ontological process that resulted in him becoming the person Abraham. Ontological, about being, generative, producing something, a process that produces a change in his being. The narrative starts near the beginning of the Bible there in Genesis chapter 12. This begins this incredible transition of God where God focuses the revelation on a particular group of people as opposed to what he had been doing, which was focusing on the entirety of humanity. However, right off the bat, God states his intention for the entirety of humanity as he's dealing with Abram. And so you'll see in Genesis 12:3, right at the end of that verse there, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So, Abram, what I'm going to do with you will affect all of the families in the earth. So let me say it this way so that we can see the connection to our discussion. The becoming process of Abram, the one, ultimately affects all of humanity, the collective. And that's what we've been talking about. Your process of becoming who you're becoming it does affect you, but it also has a larger effect. Remember, we collectively experience a becoming, and we individually are experiencing becoming. So since everyone is in this experiential progression, the collective is still affected. We see this reality in the truth of the Holy Scriptures and the narrative of God. So Abram, right? Abram is to be the father of many nations. That's what God says. And at this point, Abram has 0 children, right? But his becoming isn't really just about him becoming a father of many nations. That would be what he was becoming, right? If it was just about him becoming the father of many nations, it would be a what. His becoming is not just about a what, it's about who he's becoming. Abram's going to become Abraham. His becoming is about his name change. In his name change, we see the ontology of God's becoming process. Abram means high father, father of height, the exalted father, high and lofty thinker. It means high or honored father. Abraham means father of a multitude, father of a great multitude, but it also means father of mercy, a father of many nations. So how does Abram, the honored father, become Abraham, father of mercy, a father of many nations? In order for this transformation to take place, Abram had to go through a series of shaping opportunities. When we think about what shapes our becoming, we should note that many things in our life will assist in the becoming process. There are spiritual experiences that will assist in the becoming process, right? By spiritual experiences, we mean to communicate something that is not really explainable all the time or not easily explainable. We are not necessarily saying that there is no empirical evidence that something has happened, but that this something is not easily explained. There are personal experiences, right? These are experiences, events, or moments. If you remember narrative, what we talked about in narrative, these are events and moments that we maneuver through on our own. They may cause us to adjust our way of doing something, our way of thinking. They are things that maybe only we know. Personal experiences. Whatever they are, we recognize them as personal experiences. And of course, they're also, can't go through everything, but they're even family type, familial experiences. These can be joyful, they can be tragic, the loss of parents or a child, a divorce. They can be a celebration like a family reunion, a child born, something like that. Again, they could be any number of types of experiences, but whatever they are, we could categorize them as family experiences. Abram went through a number of experiences in his becoming process. He set up, for instance, here's one. He set up his wife in order to avoid conflict. He set her up, right? Like he turned her over in order to avoid conflict. In this shaping opportunity that God allows, obviously, one of the things in his process that is being dealt with in who he's becoming is this addressing of his fear, because he gives his wife over because of fear. He didn't want to die. He didn't want conflict. He didn't want to go through that. So who are you becoming, right? Remember, this question is about who, right? It's about who you are becoming. Who you are becoming affects you personally, and it affects the people around you. Abram's decision to give his wife over because of fear absolutely affected his wife, right? But not only his wife, it affected all the people that were with him, because just imagine being there and looking on at this. So God allows for Abram to go through this process, which also affects Sarah and the other people that are around, in order to get him to being Abraham. Have you ever thought about that? Like, this whole process is about Abram coming into and changing and being shaped to become Abraham. We should consider that in the plans we have to avoid whatever we're trying to avoid, we often create situations that produce something worse than what we were trying to avoid, right? When we go through the processes of who we are becoming, how we deal with different situations makes a difference. So what things shape us? What things shape us? There are so many unfortunate things that happen. There's some great things, but we always seem to focus on negative things. So there's so many traumas that shape people today. Unfortunately, those traumas are caused by other people, right? So the trauma that you may go through or have gone through was affected by someone else, but they also went through something as well that shaped them into who they are or who they had becoming. Who we are becoming affects the collective. However, we should not just chalk our shaping and becoming up to things that happen to us, the things that we read, the music we listen to, the television shows, the movies we watch, the food we eat. In other words, our diet shapes us. If you have a diet of music that is basically propagandizing a particular lifestyle, then you will be shaped by whatever you're listening to. Being shaped by by that will form you in your becoming process. Yes, indeed, folks, you are what you eat. We are what we eat. Even in business, there's a becoming process, right? Your leaders, executive leaders and managers, your departments, your teams will all shape your business. They all shape the view your clientele and potential clients have of your business. I remember years ago, Sprint PCS, man. I remember them as Sprint Mobile was Sprint PCS. And I remember that, they had the technology, they had good phones, they had all these things. But that's not what shaped how people viewed Sprint PCS. What shaped how people viewed Sprint PCS was their customer service, right? So the executives, the leaders of Sprint figured out this is not how we want to be in the marketplace. This is not what we want to become, right? And what they were becoming was not what the corporate executives desired for that to become. And I would assume neither were the stockholders, right? The stakeholders and stockholders. Ultimately, there was an intentional effort to change, and what resulted possibly saved the company, saved clients, saved how their placement in the industry, because that company actually grew. They were not pleased with what they were becoming, and so they made behavioral shifts. They dealt with behavioral things, actions that if those behaviors changed, would change the direction and the trajectory of who they were becoming. What they were becoming was not what they wanted to become. So they changed a portion of their employees' diet, right? They had to go to different employee classes. They had to go and take different policy changes and go through all of those things. Ultimately, it shifted their becoming path. Our question, who are you becoming, is personally evaluative. It also has in its scope and in reality or position. Not in the sense of utility. We want to make sure that we're saying that again. It's not in the sense of utility, but in the sense of an internal generative process that creates an external connectedness. It is a question of soul formation that creates a heart for the common good. It is caring for your soul, folks. Caring for your soul, which affects the becoming of culture and society. Who are you becoming? I do trust that you are enjoying our discussion, our talk today. When we return, we will go ahead and get into three more things. We're going to talk about the road to your becoming. We'll talk about the proper shaping, that proper shaping requires structure. And we'll also talk about the processing, how we process events and moments in our life. So we are glad you're here. Hope you're enjoying the conversation. When we return, we'll deal with those three things. So we will see you on the other side of this break. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a minute. Welcome back. Welcome back with us. You are in the Formation Forum, where we take principles of leadership and personal development and we marry them to the many aspects of everyday life through the lens of truth, in order that we can foster a biblical worldview. We have been talking about becoming. Today, we are considering the question, who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? If you're just joining us, welcome to the forum. Before we jump back into our discussion, please, if you have not already, take a moment and click the like button, as well as take a moment and click that share button. Always like to see, I did get a chance to interact with a few of you on that last break. So glad that you are with us. But we like for you to share so that we can see where you are actually at. We can connect with you. We like to see where we're connecting, as well as God's hand in all this. We want to see where we're moving, where this ministry is moving, this WBGR network as a ministry, as well as Christ Nation, what we're doing here with WBGR. Okay, I know we only have a few minutes. This hour is going very quickly, so let's jump right back in. So we have just finished talking about what things shape our becoming. We want to take this next segment to expand our discussion and begin talking about our becoming road. Now, I just want to remind you, I said this from the beginning, so I want to say it again here. We already know we're barely skimming the surface. This question is very, very deep. It has tentacles, man. This thing it has roots. So we know we're only beginning this discussion, and it's just the skimming of the surface. But it's a good discussion. It's a good question. It's something that hopefully we can think about all week. So let me ask this: where does the road to our becoming begin? Where does the road to your becoming begin? Well, look, I don't think that our becoming is something that we initiate. Our becoming at the beginning of our lives. We don't initiate the process. How we learn attachment, how we experience joy and pain, how we learn right and wrong, how we are taught theistic beliefs. All these and many, many other things are at the beginning of our becoming road. The road to your becoming also, we have to understand, is not fixed. So even when we join in, if you will, to the process, when we are starting to have an influence on that process from our decision making and things like that, it's not that your becoming is not a fixed path. As we talked about in the previous segment, our becoming is affected by a plethora of external and internal experiences. So we should not think, nor should you accept that our beginning guarantees our end. So in other words, if you have a rocky takeoff, it doesn't mean you're going to have a rocky landing. Nor if you take off and everything's great, does that mean that when you land, you're going to land great? That's not how it works. That's not the process, if you will. Your beginning doesn't determine your end, although many hold to we have that. Who you are becoming is not etched in stone based on historical data. So look, let me take a sidestep. I'm going to talk from a technological standpoint for just a couple of minutes. So in life, right, it's not simply okay to just have data, just to have this big heap of data. For most people, data and information are in interchangeable terms. They're interchangeable. That's not true. Data and information are two different things. In order to have the right information, you must have the right data. That's true. But having the right data doesn't reciprocate into having the right information. Well, why? Why is that? Because it is not about simply having the right data. It is also about asking the right questions, because asking the right questions permits opportunity to produce the right information. In other words, just because you have the right data does not mean you will produce the right information. Information is a production derived from data. Information is a visualization, if you will, of the data. If you ask the wrong questions, as many do, make the wrong assumptions, as many of us do, you will have an inaccurate visualization, even though you have a right data set. Even though you have a right data set. I worked and have done consulting work as a data analyst, right? We live in this time of big data. Big data is not information. Data is fragments of facts that, when put together systematically and presented, can become information. It actually does become information, but it doesn't also always mean it's the right information, right? Sometimes your data or the way you put together your information produces fake news, right? So yes, technologically, even data has a becoming process. In our time, data can be without structure, right? It can be all over the place. As a heap. It can be all over the place in different places, different containers. That is not to say that it's not good data, but that we would say that its natural state, if you will, is chaos, because it's all over the place. This is part of why there has been this huge explosion of people to work in what's called data sciences, right? They're looking for people that can do data sciences. And in order to produce the right information, though, you must have the right data. In order to produce the right information, though, you must ask the right questions. But also, in order to produce the right information, you have to first take an action to analyze whether or not the data has the right integrity. When people assume that your end is defined by your beginning, they often forsake the step of comparing data or data integrity. In the check of data integrity, one of the things that must be done is a comparison to see if where things relate, right? If one thing was to compare to another, it has to relate on some way. Inaccuracies for us are often produced because of prejudices, right? So if we are taking the facts that we have and we're saying the fact of the matter is that this person did this and this person came from this type of family and that means this end result, this end point, well, that's just not true. It's just not true. Who you are becoming isn't solely, you cannot solely tell the trajectory of where some or what somebody or who somebody's going to become based on historical data. Why? Because your becoming path is not a fixed path. In the world of data, in order to compare for checks of integrity, a data analyst may have to create what's called data structures. So this is because what we said, proper shaping requires structure. Who we are becoming is affected by structure. Structure can be patterns. Who we pattern ourselves after. I want to be like this person. I want to be like that person. Structure is a complexity. So structure involves all the parts of a whole, right? Structure is system. Structure is the organization of several different elements within the whole of a single complexity. It is not just the elements themselves, but also how these elements relate. Proper shaping requires structure. Structure is always present in our becoming, even when it is chaotic. That is to say that some of us, going through the process of who we are becoming, have no idea who we are becoming, because what we attach ourselves to changes so often that there's no set course of our becoming path. So you can't even talk about or relate to or determine the path you're on because you've connected to so many different things. You have no idea who you're becoming. Wow. This is sort of like our current cultural view on parenting. For some, not for everybody, but there seems to be this idea that we should just let our children define who they are. We should just allow them to become whatever they want to become. It sounds good. It sounds like maybe an amen belongs there, but I would pause. I would pause on that amen in the amen section, because let's consider Abram. Right? Let's go back and consider Abram again. But let's consider him from the perspective of this parenting methodology and ask a question. Does God allow Abram to define himself on his process to becoming Abraham? Consider this. As Abraham is on his becoming journey, he makes many decisions that he had learned or had to learn from. There are two we'll know. One, Abram decided with his wife to have a child through surrogacy. Now, real quick, this passage of scripture is not the Bible's stance against surrogacy. And for anybody who does that's not what this passage is about. So stop it, right? Calm down. Don't read anything into the Bible. The scriptures don't need your help. So anyway, I'm off that. So he decides to have the child with a decision, but the decision was against what God told him, even though it was culturally acceptable. So God had given him a command, or given him a promise. Really, it wasn't even a command. Given him a promise, and Abraham went against what God said to get to what he heard from God his way. Right? And so some will say, well, that's a mistake. Well, no, mistakes are what we make on tests. Sin is what we do when we do it against God. Mistakes we make, sins we commit. So the scriptures declare God comes and speaks to Abraham 13 years later, and in 17:3 we find that Abram falls on his face. He falls on his face. There's no other time prior to Genesis 17:3 where Abram falls on his face, right? There's no other time that happens. So the result we see in 17:5, where Abram is now Abraham, having been defined by God in 17:4. You can read it for yourself. Genesis 17. We don't know exactly what happened in those 13 years on his becoming, but whatever happened, it gave Abram a shifted path. Yet Abram did not define himself. He was defined by God. I want you to see that the definition did not change his uniqueness. He was still unique. And the definition that God put on him didn't change his uniqueness. As a matter of fact, who he was becoming was shaped by the event and moments that immediately preceded the 13 years there between Genesis 16:16 and Genesis 17:1. Right? So, who are we becoming? This idea of structure, this idea of shaping us, and there's so much information that I have that we're probably not going to be able to get to today. We're nearing the end, really, of our hour, and so we're coming up on another break. Before we go, when we come back, we'll continue in this, talking a little bit more about this structure thing, but we'll also talk about how shaping in view of our end goal versus shaping in view of our end reality. So when we come back, we'll talk about that. We'll close out the show, and we'll even have a short video for you to see right after this. So we will see you on the other side of this break. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. It is Friday the 13th. This is the day that the Lord has made. So glad that you are with us. You are in the Formation Forum, where we take principles of leadership and personal development and we marry them to the many aspects of our everyday life through the lens of truth in order to foster a biblical worldview. We've been talking today about becoming. The question we're considering is, who are you becoming? If you've just joined us, welcome to the forum, but dang, yo, it's late. You late, folk. You late, but I'm so glad you're still here. Stay connected to us. Make sure you like this page. You can see our show on demand. If you're just now getting to us, you can see us on demand at on here on the WBGR network. You can see our video posted here. You'll also be able to go to thechristnation.com. Again, if you haven't already, take a moment and like our page. Also share so that we know where you are connecting to us. Click that share button. That helps us to know all the places where God is sending us, if you will. Some quick things before we wrap up today. You can connect to me outside of the Formation Forum on Twitter at Pastor B Green, and on Instagram at @IAM_Pastor B. You can connect with our personal ministry efforts through Christ Nation on Twitter and Facebook as well. You just search The Christ Nation, and we should pop up there, as well as, again, at thechristnation.com, and you'll be able to also see some of our short videos and things there. Lastly, if you are in the area, if you are looking for a place to come and worship, do not hesitate to visit us at the Emmanuel City Church. We're currently meeting at 4915 St. Barnabas Road, down there in Temple Hills, Maryland. We're meeting out at our Savior's Lutheran Church. They have been very hospitable. We thank God for them as our ministry continues to flourish and grow. So let's bring our discussion to a close here. We've talked about a number of things today. We've talked about what is meant by becoming, connecting our narrative to our process of becoming. We've talked about what shapes our becoming and what things actually shape us. The road to our becoming, we've talked about that. We've talked about proper shaping requires structure. And we touched on processing events. And the thing about processing events that I wanted to come back to was that the way that we process events and moments in our life and in our narrative shapes us, because those experiences are what we use in choosing path, and the path that we will take in our becoming process. If we process events and moments in our lives by ourselves, separated in segregation and isolation, it's unhealthy. It becomes very unhealthy. The becoming process was meant by God, I believe, to be done in community. Everything that God, how He created us, is done in community, and we'll have to take a time and really begin to speak to the power of community in another show. But I do want to make sure that we land our show in a specific way. We started again by comparing whether our question was teleological or ontological. We discussed that the intention of our question was not a question of what we become, but who we are becoming. In the same manner, we should say that your shaping does not have an end goal, but there is an end reality. If we view our shaping in terms of an end reality against an end goal, then the process, the way we process the events and moments, can also change. When you think it's all on your shoulders, you process a particular way. But when you begin to think outside of yourself, remember, this generative process is internal, but in mind, what we have in mind as we go through who we are becoming, we have culture, society, people, family, all in mind, so that we understand that our process might be specific for us, but it's not solely for us. Viewing our shaping in terms of a goal puts the primary work of our shaping on our shoulders. If it is goal centric, then in essence it is utilitarian. It's function based, right? However, in viewing our shaping in terms of a reality, that then the process is chronological for us. We have to go through the process. Abram went through a process, but its end point is eternal, which is outside of the realm of our soul influence. That is to say, the primary work in your becoming is God's, not your own. The primary work in our becoming is God's, not our own. Think about Abram's narrative. Think about if you remember, Abram came from the Chaldeans. They were they believed in a multiplicity of gods. They were polytheistic. They were not monotheistic. They did not know who Yahweh was. They did not know the one true God. Abram goes through a process of becoming, which is specific to him, but has lasting effects even on us today. His becoming process affects the entirety of humanity. What we should note in this truth is that I want you to hear this. Your worth is not self first. It is communal reality. Your worth is not self first reality. It is communal reality. Understanding that your shaping lends to an end reality for more than just you is both honoring and humbling. Abram, the honored father, had to be humbled, falling on his face so that he could be honored by the Father. On his journey, Abram went through this process of becoming a father of mercy and a father to many. Abram went through the process of becoming Abraham. Who are you becoming? A question that risks us to risk ourselves in order to find ourselves, right? Who are you becoming? This question, a question of self-evaluation, as we've said, whose answer will purpose or propose rather a future for the many, a question of eschatology in reality, right? That causes you to define your theology, define what you believe now. Who are you becoming? A question that provides a place for us to start thinking in terms of reality instead of goals. Understanding that the primary work is not on you for the humbled, but the workmanship is God's. I want to end here with this though. This is what the scripture says in Ephesians 2:10. It says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." Now, as we end the show, we're going to go into to the final five. I want you to enjoy this short video. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion today, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Who are you becoming? Enjoy the week, and have an awesome time in worship, and we'll see you next week.